Kink is really an umbrella term for a lot of different types of sexualities that don't really fit into the norm. And one of the main aspects of kink, at least as far as I'm concerned, is BDSM.
I mean, kink to me also is just a feeling of just my sexuality being more of a taboo. And, you know, that's like expressed in different ways, including BDSM. I have a lot of different kinks, including being an exhibitionist and making porn.
You could watch my porn and see a lot of my kinks and how I am. I would say, as far as kink, I identify as a switch. But I can be very subby. It just really depends on who I'm with. There's definitely certain people I would never sub for, and I can only imagine myself dominating.
I identify as a switch or a verse, and also I identify as a dom. It really depends on who I'm with, and obviously what the scene's gonna be that ties into my polyamorous identity, because I love the idea of having different experiences with different people. That's 100% part of my kink. Not to say that to be polyamorous you're also kinky, but for me that is the case.
Or to be kinky or polyamorous, because there's definitely people who are kinky who are monogamous.
Kinky people are just basically a community of outsiders, and that's something that I enjoy being a part of, because as outsiders I see it as we're actually helping to break the mold and create another space and another type of a space where people could feel more safe practicing what they actually desire.
The most affirming thing and that helps me to stay proud is really surrounding myself with other people. Maybe not physically surrounding myself, but energetically surrounding myself with other people, or only trying to consume things that will affirm my identity, and not really concerning myself with anything external beyond that.
Centering Black sexuality in kink looks like just affirming, Black people in kinky spaces, because there's so many kinky spaces that are very white and very just in general just anti-Black, and that is a major problem in the kink community, because there's a lot of fetishization.
And some of that is consensual.
You will see a lot of Black people as entertainment, a lot of Black people basically tokenized within the kink community. Black people have to carve out their own spaces, and people of color in general need to carve out their own spaces within the kink community that's very affirming for them.
My identity has impacted how I navigate kink and polyamory and consent, making me be a lot more cautious. I think when interacting with people, I'm definitely really wary of people's intentions and motives, and some of that comes from trauma also, which ties into identity, but really the foundation in a kinky dynamic, being able to trust someone. And so there are certain people who I will extend my trust to more easily than others.
There's a higher rate of rape and assault to trans people within the kink community. You might be in more risky situations in general, and it's important to have explicit boundaries when it comes to dealing with consent. You want to have a boundary of what's consensual and what's not, but certain things like a safety word or an action can make a huge
safety
difference.
Gesture.
Yeah,
if you can't speak.
A gesture that will make a huge difference within a scene, as to not blurring the lines of consent. And the same with being under any type of influence of drugs or alcohol, that can also blur the lines of consent. And it's important when you're in a kinky scene to be able to give your full consent. And when I talk about consent, that's even just applying to consensual non-consent. So in navigating consent and within our polyamory and our kink is just to establish very like specific boundaries, especially before like heading into a scene. So one of our kinks is consensual non-consent, and you can see that in our video Foxy Strikes Back. But the point of the matter is that we actually discussed that scene beforehand. We were in a partnership, and within that, like, we've already had discussions on like what's safe for us and what like is okay for us.
And even during the scene, like, to make sure that everyone is still feeling like it's a consensual situation.
As a Black and trans person, like in the kink community, like I feel like there's not enough representation like at events or at certain like meetup spaces or munches. You have to create your own safe space, and a lot of times like that comes with just, you know, pulling together with a bunch of other Black or brown people. We created our own space by creating our own like porn company and making our own kinky films. We had to create that space because there wasn't really an opening for us, like if we hadn't done that ourselves.
To do it how we wanted to do
Right.
it, you know, to feel like we're portraying ourselves how we want to be portrayed. We recognize that like there are people like us out there who really are longing to find each other.
But also just people who are just longing to like see some type of representation. People want to see themselves, and I want to do what I do to help to inspire other people to do that and create those spaces.
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot of kinky people out there, and it's like hard to see each other sometimes because we basically are avoiding those spaces that we don't feel safe, you know, which are like the public spaces. So really building that like private space together it's really essential, and it's really sacred also.
Work to improve spaces, to all types of spaces, to actually be inclusive of like Black trans people and actually empowering them in that space, being mindful of the energy that you're trying to create and making it a welcoming environment for like Black trans people specifically. Basically, because I'm a sex worker and I'm also kinky, there's a different space in my mind for my work compared to like my actual personal dynamics. And sometimes I feel like as a sex worker, people might come at me thinking, this is you, this is all you, like watching my films and thinking this is how it's gonna be when I'm with you even.
And not taking into account that we're in a role, like we're ourselves, yes, like we're performing a role, and sometimes that role is like totally different from who we actually are.
Yeah, taking into account that it's a movie and I am like performing. It's not necessarily how I am in real life. And in general, like porn is fantasy and it has a lot to do with fantasy. And sometimes people want to idealize me and just like put me into a certain like category because they've seen my porn or they're thinking of me as a sex worker because they feel already so connected to me sexually.
Yeah, like there are a lot of preset notions about what a role looks like and what types of behaviors, you know, someone should have if they're in a certain type of role. Definitely impacts like how safe you may or may not feel, like trying to like push some of those boundaries or change some of those boundaries that are sort of these like rigid defined roles in the kink community. Like, and that kind of goes outside of kink too, like in polyamory, like the idea about what these certain things are, or like the idea about what it means to be trans, the idea about what it means to be Black, all of these things impact how you relate to each other, get underneath, you know, each of those things and sort of just really address your feelings is really like the most important thing in trying to like navigate consent and like keeping yourself safe.
There's a certain way to go about setting your boundaries and still honoring like your kinky dynamic, you know, because obviously when you're in a kinky dynamic, certain boundaries might already be set, but you need to just establish like what your perimeters are around those boundaries.
Yeah.
And what's like feels good for you within that dynamic. Hopefully you've enjoyed some of our points on polyamory, kink, or trans for trans, and also look to our other projects that we're doing and support our work.
Yes, and we definitely want to thank DFI CBR for inviting us to be a part of this. It's definitely really important that we keep putting out content into the world that promotes trans for trans love, promotes respect, promotes protecting, those words people like to put in their hashtags, actually showing that and putting it into our lives in a very real way.
Yeah. Show love for Black trans people and really show love. That's the goal. And we love you.